things. And the title, I should say, is a reference to Friday Night Lights, a very popular TV show. If you've heard of it, that's sort of the mantra of the football team that the series focuses on. So first, a little bit about me. Like I said, I was the reference and instruction librarian at a local private Catholic college when I did this project. Before that, I got my master's in library science in 2020. And before that, I did my undergraduate in classics, which is the study of Latin and ancient Greeks. So please believe me when I say technology is not my forte originally, and it still really isn't. But I was able to work with AI in this capacity, and I hope that that can give you confidence if you're nervous about it. Also, I'm not a sports fan, and I have never, in fact, seen Friday Night Lights, but my sister is a sports fan, and she loves that show more than life itself. So I had her review the slide, and hopefully it would make her proud. So in this session, I will define Lowe's CLEAR framework. I will describe how I use the CLEAR framework to teach undergraduates about using AI both ethically and using it well. Then I will share some preliminary results from student surveys and discuss challenges and lessons learned. So why? So that you can incorporate artificial intelligence skills and or the CLEAR framework into your own library instruction, and so that as information and instruction professionals, we can compare notes about what our campus communities want from AI literacy instruction. So first, setting up the play. Each section will have a cute little reference to football. Hopefully it's not too annoying as I go through these slides here. So what I mean here is, what is the CLEAR framework? So in 2023, Dr. Leo Lowe published an article called The Clear Path, a framework for enhancing information literacy through prompt engineering. So it provided the CLEAR framework as a basic AI prompt engineering framework specifically for students. And in this article, he shared a call to action to share our experiences and feedback with the broader academic community. So I'm trying to kind of respond to the call there. So what is the CLEAR framework? CLEAR is an acronym that stands for concise, logical, explicit, adaptive, and reflective. So like I would tell the students, the first three letters are about the prompt, but the last two are about you as the researcher and the user. So C stands for concise, and it means to be clear and only use necessary words. L stands for logical, and that means to structure the prompt to have a logical flow. Explicit means specify the output you want. And then these are the two that describe you, is to be adaptive, to be flexible, and to be reflective, to evaluate the output that the generative AI gives you. And when I say generative AI, I mean specifically tools like ChatGPT, Google's Gemini, Copilot, things of that nature. So how do you use a CLEAR framework? What does it look like in action? So to be concise, you would use command words. So instead of saying, could you please give me a list of relevant keywords about psychology? You would say list relevant keywords about psychology, sort of cut to the chase. To be logical, you could use phrases with beginning with and ending with. So for example, list keywords about psychology, beginning with parapsychology, ending with positive psychology, something like that. Explicit means giving details like scope and format. So instead of saying list these, maybe you could say list 3 to 5 examples, write a discussion board post of 250 words, things of that nature. Adaptive means experimenting with words or phrases. As librarians, we experiment with search terms all the time. And be reflective, to use critical thinking. So I thought that these skills fit neatly within information literacy instruction. For example, within the ACRL framework, I thought that the CLEAR framework fit within research as inquiry, searching as strategic exploration. There's a lot of strategic elements to the CLEAR framework, and scholarship as conversation. So a lot of generative AI is structured as chatbots, so it's literally a conversation. So thinking about research within the context of that conversation, as well as the conversation between scholars and experts. Also, I saw some skills overlap. So between keyword and prompt creation, there's that strategy and creative element there. There's the adaptability and resilience that you have to be a researcher, and evaluating it for accuracy and bias, which we do with all sorts of information, not only research-based or scholarly, but all kinds. So the research questions, or the lines of scrimmage that I have here. First was, how do students perceive the efficacy of the CLEAR framework? Next, how do students feel about the framework within library instruction? And finally, does the CLARE framework help students develop good AI prompts? Does it work? Does it do what it set out to do? So to do that, I developed a research procedure. So I did it within my traditional instructional sessions, the one-shot class sessions that I had throughout the year. I did get IRB approval for the whole project at the start. And then once I got that approval, once professors requested it, I would embed this in the session. So before class, I would have students pull up the library website and ChatGPT because they would be using both throughout the session. I'll note that at the time I was visiting these classes, ChatGPT still required a login, so I just provided credentials for them to use and change the password and wipe the history after each class for privacy reasons. So then I would introduce students to library searching using keywords and Boolean operators, same as I would in a traditional or conventional one-shot. And then I would introduce students to AI, prompt engineering, and specifically the CLARE framework. Then we would wrap up by discussing evaluating information for credibility and bias. I do that at the end of every even non-AI instruction sessions, but I especially talked about it within the context of AI. So I visited 9 courses overall. I got 53 submissions, 34 of which were complete, where every question was filled out. And that's less than I worked at a small university, so it was a smaller sample size than I was hoping for. It would be great if I could have gotten to 100. But I mean, I still got some good data, I think, out of it, or some useful data for my purposes. And to collect data, I had developed a digital handout. So there were 3 tasks that students had to do, and there were 3 pages of a LibWizard survey that they would fill out after completing the informed consent form. So they would create a library search prompt and then reflect on what they found. Then they would create an AI prompt, reflect on that. And then there would be a final reflection along with some typical survey questions. So I have a screenshot of the last page, that reflection piece on the slide. So you might be able to see there are 2 open-ended questions at the top and then some Likert scale items there. So then I analyzed the data at the conclusion of the school year. So we had quantitative data from the Likert scale and the yes or no questions. And we also had some qualitative items from the reflection and also from the search queries and the AI prompts, which students added to the digital handout. So I developed a rubric. Luckily, with the CLARE framework, it was pretty clear. It was pretty obvious what the criteria should be. So I have over here the rubric, very simple rubric that I developed, and I did scoring for those. So I want to share my preliminary results, mostly based on the quantitative feedback that I got. But before I dive into those, I wanted to talk about who requested the AI instruction and see if this matched what you all were seeing at your institutions. So the courses are listed on the left in a chart or in a graph or table, pardon me. So we had 2 sections of business, 2 sections of English, 2 sections of political science, and 1 each in education, geography, and philosophy. So a lot of humanities courses, a lot of writing-based courses, which I think by the end of the presentation won't be very surprising. And then on the right, I have another table about course division, if they were lower or upper level. So we had 6 lower level courses and 3 upper level. And that surprised me because I had heard from webinars and conversations with faculty comparing generative AI to a calculator, that it would be best leveraged by scholars who had developed their competency, that lower level experts who are still learning are developing those skills before they would be able to use the calculator really well. And so the analogy goes with AI would be best be used by those who already had their footings in a scholarly field. So I thought it was interesting that the lower level had more requests. But I think, again, by the end of the presentation, that will make more sense. So first, students perceived success. So the handout asked students after they did their library search and after they entered their AI prompts with ChatGPT, it just asked, was it successful? Did you find what you were looking for? So for both, students found what they were looking for the majority of the time. It was a little bit different from the library, but not by a lot, not a very significant difference. So overall, they were able to create keywords and develop effective prompts. I asked their satisfaction with the CLARE framework, and they were overwhelmingly satisfied. A couple folks were on the fence, but nobody disagreed. It could also be that there aren't that many alternatives, but it was a good, at least a quick sniff test, if you will. The students didn't hate it, they thought it was useful. So then I asked them the following statements. Was the instruction about like the library and AI, was that relevant? Was there overlap between the library search and the process of writing an AI prompt? Could they see themselves using those skills later in their academic career? Could they see themselves using those skills in a workplace setting later? So this is what it looks like numerically. I'll have the percentage on the next slide. So first, was it relevant? Overwhelmingly, strongly agree. Was there overlap between the library keyword creation and AI prompt? That got more mixed results. Overall, high levels of agreement, but that was the only question that received some actual disagreement, suggesting that the way that I had framed the process might not have been the most effective. So then these last two, it looks like they received the same amounts. Largely, they could agree that they would see themselves using these skills later. And I was curious if these were the same 31 people, but actually it's not. So somebody who strongly agreed that they could use it in their academic career couldn't always see themselves using it in their workplace career, which I thought was interesting. So this is the same exact data, just represented a bit differently, represented percentage-wise. So the blue and the green, those are the strongly agree. So high rates of agreement, the only disagreement being the overlap. So one takeaway is that students seem to value instruction about AI. So these are just the same data points pulled out to be evidence for this point. So they strongly agreed that it was relevant and they thought that they could use it later in an academic setting and a workplace setting. Another takeaway is that they did think it belonged in the library, but perhaps in a different way. So again, high rates of agreement, but some disagreement about the overlap. So now I wanted to go into the challenges and obstacles of this project. So one of the first challenges is that is what I've called a false start. So I shared my credentials at the beginning. I'm not a social science researcher. I was still learning about a lot of this, about research design and trying to do statistical analyses and rubric development. So I think that had I had that at the beginning, I could have developed a stronger research design. For example, why I didn't have students develop a prompt at the beginning of class and then rewrite it at the end, I'll never know. That would have been a great pre and post assessment, but I didn't think about it until it was too late. Another challenge was faculty reticence, what I've termed holding. So not only faculty are reticent about AI, students can also be hesitant. People I've talked to, my peers, are also hesitant about AI, so I understand where they're coming from. But it definitely limited the reach of this project and the reach of AI literacy instruction at my institution was just some of that reticence. I think also confusion at the institutional level, which Thomas More was not unique. Everyone, if you work in academic libraries, you can probably relate. Everyone didn't really know what the policy should be, and I think so those policies are still in development. The next challenge is delay of game. So that's a timing aspect, and there were sort of two sides to this. First, was there sufficient time in a one-shot session to cover everything? And I will say it did get a little tight, trying to cover the library as well as AI, as well as the reflection and the data collection, and giving students time to explore the library as well as the AI chatbot. It could get a little bit tight. It would be great to have more time to dive in. So that's one thing to consider. And then the other timing aspect is how to keep pace with rapid AI developments. You know, these fields are changing all the time. There's even a website called There's an AI for that with just newly developed AI tools. So there are a lot of things being built all the time. And I'd also read in blog posts and heard in webinars that prompt engineering would be less important as these tools grow more sophisticated. So in the same way that Google can kind of anticipate what users are really searching for, AI will get better at decoding prompts, even if they aren't clear in terms of the CLEAR framework. So another obstacle was developing the rubric. And honestly, I could ramble about that for another 45-minute presentation, but I'll spare you. So first, evaluating keyword searches, I did a literature review on that and didn't find a clear consensus. I did find the criteria I have on the slides. Is it using keywords or is it just asking a question to a database? Are the words related to the topic? And does the student use Boolean operators? So that worked. The clear rubric I shared at the beginning a bit earlier, and that worked pretty well. The only problem was that it might have been the nature of the prompts, but I had difficulty evaluating if they were logical. Not many of the prompts really needed that logical component. It was either completely present or completely absent, depending on how you wanted to rate it. So when I first started doing these sessions, I would give students a scenario and say, like, you're helping a student or you're helping your friend develop research topics. What is a prompt that they could use to find those? Whereas towards the end, I just sort of said, pick a prompt that's relevant to your class. So if I had given them something a bit more complicated, for example, I've also used ChatGPT to help write lesson plans, and that requires a logical component, right? To say begin with a warm up, end with assessment, something like that. So that was one obstacle. And then the reflection piece, that was just another aspect of developing a rubric. So I just used a very simple one. Was reflection present, and is it developing or proficient? So developing the rubric was one main obstacle. The other one is obviously the sample size, because trying to find a statistically significant sample or trying to achieve that was more difficult than anticipated. So now I want to share some lessons learned and some references that might be useful if you want to undertake a similar project. So first, include more about what generative AI is and how it works. So first, I have to admit, I had kind of fallen prey to the fear-mongering. I had seen a lot of articles and blogs like these I have screenshots of from the Chronicle of Higher Education in The Atlantic. I thought all these students, they're using AI every day, they're using it for every assignment, blah, blah, blah. But some classes I visited and they had never heard of ChatGPT. And at first I didn't believe them, but then I realized I really hadn't. So I showed them how it worked and they were just like overjoyed. They thought it was such a great tool. You know, they thought it was really cool and interesting. And I think that we kind of lose that element of joy and celebration. So I think including more about what it is can be valuable. I think about how it works is also valuable. So I added slides about how AI was trained, specifically ChatGPT, as we don't really know a lot of how it was trained. We do know things like it was trained on Wikipedia as well as fan fiction websites. So that helps, show students there are going to be some inaccuracies and some strangeness. There is going to be some biases that they should look out for. Also, I wanted to share, I think I got this from the LIRT conference last year, or a different webinar. I've seen so many. But they compared ChatGPT to a giant autocomplete. And I think that really helped help it click in students' heads that, this isn't giving me an answer. This is giving me what an answer to my prompt would sound like based on their language model. The next takeaway is that faculty wanted more on academic integrity. So I didn't have faculty fill out the form, but they shared their feedback after class, and they really wanted me to talk about plagiarism first, foremost, maybe in entirety, They wanted to make sure students understood that using AI would be considered plagiarism. And just a side note about policy, at Thomas More, at least at the time I left, they had different sets of language that professors and departments could use, indicating whether some AI use was acceptable, whether even using tools like Grammarly would be considered plagiarism, depending on how stringent or how open they wanted their policies to be. So, but they did want to make sure that students understood that just copying and pasting output from an AI without disclosing it, that would be considered plagiarism. They also wanted me to discuss the consequences of plagiarism at the institution and to talk to students about AI detectors, which I know is a bit of a controversial topic because they aren't very reliable. But I have some examples on the screen. Turnitin has an AI detector. There's also Zero GPT. But I also wanted to let you know, if you haven't seen these already, as I was doing research about AI detectors, I saw some services to humanize AI, take AI content and somehow use AI to make it sound more human. So that's something to look out for. So I think overall the biggest takeaway is if I were to, do instruction again, it would be to frame AI literacy instruction differently. Because about a third of the sample did not see overlap between library research and AI prompt engineering, And also, given that faculty wanted a more skeptical and critical approach, I think it's important to also talk about what we use AI for, what we would use the library for. So I tell students, if you want to find peer-reviewed research, go to the library. If you want help with brainstorming, use AI. So in that sense, maybe it doesn't make sense, or my approach didn't make sense to frame them as something they would do together. So another thought is to maybe talk about AI. We talk about news and media literacy, especially given fears about how AI can be used in misinformation and in fake news. And I don't know if you heard, but it's an election year, so that's also something that will likely come up in the fall. So these are some of my references that I used. The first one has a rubric for scoring AI output. The next one is Leo Lowe's article about the CLEAR framework. And then the last one is about reflection, which I also used as I was building my digital handout. So that's all for me. Are there any questions? Actually, let me stop sharing. All right, it says low bandwidth on my screen, so I apologize if I was in and out.
Well, I don't have a question. I just want to say I love the theme. I was perfectly done. Well done. Just great stuff.
Thank you so much. I'll have to tell me she had to really review all the football terms that I use.
Yes, it was a football fan and librarian's dream presentation. Just know that.
I don't know if anybody else was kicked off, but my Zoom failed and I actually was thrown out of the session and had to come back in. So I'm sorry if I missed anything, but the part I caught was really cool. I love your approach of just saying, yeah, if you need scholarly articles, you go to the library. If you need help brainstorming AI. That's really awesome. Also I was at ALA last week and I went to a vendor who was doing a thing about, you know, buying their website or their search engine or whatever because it made AI easier. And really they were just talking about smart search technology, which like maybe is AI, I guess. Like type in this and it'll recommend other keywords, which most of our databases are already doing. Have you encountered anything like that with faculty not realizing that we'd already been using some extent of that prior?
Yeah, I've had people ask me about specific projects using AI, and it sounds like they're all talking about proprietary tools or, like you said, AI tools that already existed. So I
Exactly.
started also telling students, yeah, about the difference between, and I don't know the exact word, but AI that classifies versus AI that creates. I would give the example of like whenever I drive out of my lane, my steering wheel always tries to kick me back. Like there's that
Right.
kind of AI. But then there's also, yeah, like write an article about the integrity of voting in the election, so that it'll spit something out. The differences between those kinds of tools. Yeah, I've seen that also.
Are there other questions or do we move right to wrapping up? We won't obviously do another break, I don't think, before the end. All right. Well, oh wait, I'm not the host anymore, I forgot. Julie, can you stop, I guess, the